As a non-native English speaker, have you ever had this weird experience where the more you overpronounce every single element of speech, the less you're understood? The more you make an effort to be clear with every single thing you're saying, strangely, the less of an impact you seem to have in that conversation. Not just from being understood first time, but maybe even from getting that message across in the way you want to get it across. There's one particular reason that this might be the case. And it comes down to one particular sound of English. So today I'm going to show you that particular sound, which is the most common sound in English. And I'm going to show you how working on improving that sound is going to help you get much more clear in English, but also it's going to help your natural rhythm of speech and finally get you to get your message across much more effectively. And it really is that possible with one sound to make all those changes step by step. And I'm going to show you how to do that step by step by focusing on patterns. Today is going to be the first video, the first of 12 patterns of English that feature this particular sound that's going to help you achieve all those things and hopefully more in your speech. So let's get started. So to explore this sound, this pattern, we're going to use two simple English words. The first is information and the second is government. So information and government. Now, what happens if I start to overpronounce for whatever reason, either because, I want to do my best to make an effort to speak, or because of the influence of my first language? Overpronounce these words. Let me show you, let me demonstrate. So I wouldn't do this, but here's how it sounds. Information. Information. Government. Government. What did I do differently? So in the first word, syllables number 2 and number 4 were different. And in the second word, the second and third syllables were different. I was changing the vowel sound in those words. Normally, I would not make them as fully formed as I just demonstrated. So the first one, I said for. I said information. So I wouldn't normally say for, I would normally say f. I wouldn't normally say shon with rounded lips. I would say shin with neutral lips and a very short sound. I wouldn't normally say government with an e. I would say government. Government with a less fully formed mouth shape. I wouldn't be smiling for government. I wouldn't be rounding my lips for those other syllables in information. I would keep my lips quite neutral. So would it surprise you if I told you that all of these things, these syllables, these vowel sounds I highlighted, is the same? The vowel sound is exactly the same. Listen again. Information. Government. Let me just show you those syllables by themselves. F, shin, v, ment. I'm making a lazy sound. We call this sound the schwa vowel sound, and you may have come across this before. There's great tutorials all about this all over YouTube. I guess what I want to show you why it's important. I want to give you my take on why it's important, but also crucially I want to show you the patterns where I found the schwa, and I think which would be good patterns for you to focus on to start improving your pronunciation of the schwa. So the schwa sound itself is a short vowel sound, and as you've experienced, it can be spelt in many different ways. In fact, it could be spelt in over 14 different ways in English, but it's always the same sound. It's this lazy Physically, in terms of the lip position, it's somewhere in between where we're smiling, and o, where we're rounding. It's right in between there. Not every language has this middle point. Sometimes you have an and an o and nothing in between, but English does, right? If you speak about the tongue position, you could also talk about high and low, or forward and back. So when we talk about forward and back, that in English, at least in standard Southern British English, which is how I'm talking to you right now, the spreading or the rounding of the lips tends to coordinate with the movement of the tongue backwards or forwards. So a spread smiling lip position corresponds to a forward tongue position. For example, my tongue's a bit further forward. You might not feel it, but that's what's happening. If I say my lips are rounding, but also kind of coordinating along with that, the back of my tongue is a bit raised. I'm activating the back of my tongue, not the front, but the back. Again, you might not feel that, but it's happening. So forward, back, and then in the middle, Again, the tongue is not forward, back, high or low. It's resting right in the middle of the mouth. And that's what makes this sound so lazy. So you could say I'm being selectively lazy with my pronunciation of information of government. I'm not pronouncing everything equally. I'm stressing some parts of the word and I'm reducing other parts of the word. And the key to that, one of the big keys to that, perhaps the biggest, is mastering this schwa sound, getting your tongue resting centrally, getting your mouth positioned nice and neutral. Make your whole, deactivate your whole face. Yeah, release every muscle, and just look a bit boring for a second. Yeah, and that's all you have to do. That's the schwa vowel sound. So it's short, lips are neutral, tongue is neutral, and it's the most common vowel in English, and it's never stressed. So in standard Southern British English, we never stress the schwa vowel sound. So why do we want to focus on this? Let's go back to those words. You may have noticed I really changed my pronunciation of those words, and it's quite obvious, right? Information, government. You can really hear it's not my normal accent, and my rhythm sounds off. That's my first thing. It's the first reason why working on the schwa might help you if you're a non-native English speaker, is it's going to help your rhythm and your general intonation to sound much more natural. And often clients come to me thinking they have a problem with word linking, but actually this is the problem, this is the challenge at least, is they're not using the schwa as often as they could, and if they did, they would feel like they were linking words together more smoothly. Yeah? It's not really about word linking, it's more about reducing the fully formedness, reducing that to more of a neutral mouth position to make those parts of words sound less obvious, less stressed. That has a big impact, as you can imagine. Knowing that it's the most common vowel in English, you can imagine if you start to use the schwa consistently, that is going to have a huge impact on your speech. If you're not using it, if you're overpronouncing those parts of speech across words and sentences, just because it's such a common sound, it will make a big effect on your rhythm of speech and your natural flow, which is really important for connecting with the other speaker in whatever accent they're speaking in. You want to get into a rapport or a flow with them, and hopefully they'll try and do the same with you. But it's a two-way street. So one of those things you can do is start using the schwa more obviously and more consistently, really, to get that natural rhythm and flow. So number one is rhythm. Number two is clarity. So the second reason why working on the schwa is pretty important is because if I don't do it, right, let me demonstrate again, right, if I say information. So let's just have another word example here. Let me give you a word example such as stable, the word like stable. The question is, at what point when I said that, at what point in time did you realize the meaning of the word I was saying? Stable. Probably right at the end, right? You have to wait for the second syllable. It's quite a short word. But if it's a longer word like description, maybe you knew what I was going to say by the time I said descript. You kind of knew what was coming. Why is that? Well, our brains are very good at spotting patterns, and they do this really, really smart statistical analysis of what's likely to be the meaning if they're saying these particular syllables in this order, in this combination. So when I say stable, if I change the vowel sound in that word, if I didn't pronounce the vowel sound correctly, if I shortened it, for example, shortened the A vowel sound from stable into something like stable, stable, and suddenly it becomes less clear. Why? Because the brain is doing more work trying to figure out, did they say stubble or stable? Well, in this context, it makes sense that stable was the word this person used. So yeah, probably that one. All this happens very quickly in someone's brain, but it takes them brain power. And even if they are understanding you first time, it might be at a slight delay, and it might be with a bit of a barrier to communication. So just by nature of changing a vowel sound, of course it makes it less clear, but there's more to it. Because the schwa is never stressed, if you overpronounce the schwa, if you make a more fully formed vowel sound, information, then you are calling attention to parts of words which people don't normally call attention to. The listener you're speaking to is suddenly distracted by parts of speech they shouldn't be distracted by. Their ear is kind of listening out for the stressed parts of speech, but you're feeding them stuff and saying, look at this, look at this, look at this, and you're making every syllable sound quite equal. One is equal to the other. And in the context of English, it doesn't quite work that well. And that can make it perhaps even more difficult to understand. And this is that paradox. This is why, if you sometimes overpronounce things, actually you're less understood. Why? Because, well, did he say form? Right? What's the form of this? Information? Or did he say in four, the number 4? You know, both of those words, form and the number 4, have that or vowel sound, which is a fully formed vowel sound, and it's stressed. And because it sounds like you're stressing it, because you're overpronouncing, because you're rounding your lips, it's making your listener think that maybe you said 4, think that maybe you said form, or whatever other syllable might be possible in the context of what you're saying. And it leaves the brain thinking, oh, all these options are open. What could this person be saying? Of course, this is happening in a split second, and they might figure out what you're saying very quickly, but it still creates a barrier to communication. So clarity, pretty important for clarity. And the third thing, it all comes down to this whole idea of stress as well, is impact. Because what you're doing is, if you're overpronouncing what should be lazy parts of speech, if you're overpronouncing those parts, what's happening is you are not just making a barrier to intelligibility and clarity, but also by calling attention to the wrong parts of the word, you are, I guess, you're denying yourself the ability to put all your expression and your stress on the stressed parts, the parts which should carry all the meaning. So in the word information, the may syllable is the stressed syllable. And you could say that syllable, the vowel sound in particular, is what we use to get our expression across and our meaning across. You can hear my voice is going up and down on the stressed syllables when I'm talking. Yeah? So I can do that, and I can make that much more effective in the context of English. This is not true for every language, but for English, if you spend more time on the stresses, if you are reducing the other syllables down a little bit by using the schwa, by making the schwa sound nice and lazy where it should be, then you are allowing the stressed important part of what you're saying to really get across to the listener. You're allowing your message to land in their ear, in their imagination. So it has an impact on your impact when you're speaking, on your effectiveness of communication. So where do you find the schwa? Well, it can be spelt 14 different ways. And one of those is, well, we've got a few here, right? Information, you can see here, government on your screen, they're spelt in different ways. For example, one of the probably trickiest spellings of this is the O-U-G-H spelling in a word like thorough and borough. So in those words, O-U-G-H, 4 letters represent one sound. It might surprise you, but it's true. Thorough, borough. You can hear after I release the consonant, I just release it into a lazy schwa sound. Thorough, borough. I don't say thorough, borough, and move my lips. It's lazy. And again, there's no consistency here, so we can't say that O-U-G-H is always pronounced this one way. You may have seen other lessons and other memes and things elsewhere with this particular spelling. There's though, there's through, there's loads of different spellings that have this. There's loads of vowel sounds which this one spelling can represent. And there are 14 of them for the schwa sound. 14 different spellings for one sound. So you could say, well, I'm just going to learn them. It isn't 14, it's not too bad, but you can't say that because each individual spelling could be pronounced in different ways, in different English words. Like the word form I gave you earlier, it has the same OR spelling as the word information, where the OR is a schwa sound. Yeah? Schwa, information, form, or it's a rounded vowel sound. There's no consistency. But what you can do is you can zoom out a little bit and you can look at the way the word information finishes. For example, the T-I-O-N at the end of the word information, or the M-E-N-T at the end of government. You ask yourself now, are there more words like this? Well, yes, there are. Next question, do those examples contain a schwa fairly often, fairly consistently? Well, that's definitely true for word endings which happen at the ends of words like information. You have words like action and many, many more words where we use a schwa sound. We don't pronounce the letter I separately, by the way. In that combination, we just pronounce a schwa sound in that final syllable, one vowel sound, not two. Same is true for government. We don't pronounce the sound at the end there, we pronounce a schwa vowel, and there are loads more words that have this ment ending, M-E-N-T, like moment, for example. Establishment. Can you hear? I'm not saying moment, moment. I'm not saying establishment, I'm saying establishment, moment. I'm using a schwa sound. So if you zoom out a little bit, you can start to see these patterns. You can start to see that actually, yeah, there are plenty of these examples of endings of words, or sometimes the starts of words, sometimes in the middle, where there's a commonly used schwa pattern. Now, because there are more letters here, there's going to be more examples. In fact, I've come up with about 38 of these over my years coaching and teaching this to people. And I've been very hesitant to teach this to people because there's 38 things to learn, and I don't like to teach people in a way where it's about rote memorization. I don't feel that's the best way we acquire language or acquire pronunciation. But those patterns are there and they're useful. So I thought, well, how can I make it more manageable to teach this? So what I did was, I realized that some of these patterns, of these 38 different patterns, like the M-E-N-T in moment and the T-I-O-N in information, some of them look similar to each other. So the T-I-O-N and the M-E-N-T, for example, look very similar to each other. They have the letter N involved, they're at the ends of words, and you can find even more examples that look similar as well. For example, if you take the T-I-O-N, you could also have the S-I-O-N, like in passion, for example. Or if you look at the M-E-N-T, well, why not look at words with E-N-T and put them in the same group? Because there are words like patient and confident that end in E-N-T, where it's, again, it's a schwa vowel sound. And now, if you're grouping these together, you have fewer things to focus on. Yeah, you work on one group, not lots of individual patterns. And what you could do to make this even more memorable, perhaps, is you could give it a clever name, a funny little name. So I call this particular pattern, I call it the husband's moment of action group. The husband's moment of action. Husband, A-N-D, moment, E-N-T, action, T-I-O-N. And I didn't even realize that was an innuendo until I told one of my clients the husband's moment of action. And then she laughed, and I thought, well, I'm going to keep it because it's memorable, right? So husband, A-N-D, and there are more actually. This is actually the biggest group I've come up with. There are 8, I believe, 8 different spellings in that one pattern. So husband, A-N-D, but you can have A-N-T as well. I can't think of any words in that group, but I'll put some on the screen. And there are a few more. It's quite a big group. But we're not going to focus on the big group today because I've already spent lots of time explaining other stuff about the schwa in this video. So we're going to focus on a much smaller group. We're going to focus on just a very simple one, which I call connect completely. Yeah. So this list is called connect completely. So words like connect, words like completely with the C-O-N or the C-O-M I guess you could call it a prefix in many cases. At least the start of words, maybe they're not all technically prefixes, but the beginnings of these words, starting with C-O-N and C-O-M. So we have words like connect or confuse, and for completely, there are more words like that. We have words like complacent, for example. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few sentences with some examples where the beginnings of these words are really short and really lazy because they contain the schwa very often. Not always, but very often, right? So just copy this first of all. Say this word, connect. So we don't say connect. No, we say connect. We don't say completely, we say completely. Watch my lips. Connect. Completely. Yeah, very neutral, expressionless, boring face I'm making at the starts of these words. Many more like them. So we're going to check out some examples and then we're going to find some exceptions because there are loads of exceptions too. At least there are, well, not loads. There are a few important exceptions. I'm not going to say there's too many because there's a reason I'm showing you this list, because it's such a common pattern where words do have a schwa sound, just like the ones I'm going to give you now. So after we've done the examples, we'll look at some contradictory, there's one, some contradictory exceptions where we do not use a schwa in similar spellings. And after that, I'll give you some more information on how to find some more resources for these and what to do if you're struggling. So let's get started with some sentences with the Connect Completely schwa pattern list. Here we go.
The computers haven't connected properly. It's a bit confusing. It's saying they're not compatible. It contains completely nothing and conveys no meaning. The car's in great condition. The owner was clearly a considerate driver. Did you compare it to the other one?
But what if I said, don't be so condescending? English is so complicated and contradictory. Can you hear that? I'm not using a schwa with these cons and coms anymore. It's so complicated. Don't be so condescending. English is contradictory. So if you have a suspicion when you hear me saying those words of, oh, maybe it's because he's stressing those parts of the words. Maybe that's why he's not using the schwa. Well, that's a good instinct to have, and usually that's true. Actually, in these cases, if I say, for example, complicated, yeah, the first syllable of that word is very stressed. Complicated. It's the stressed syllable of that word. Complicated. If I say condescending and contradictory, it's not the main stress, it's the secondary stress. I mean, that would take a whole new video to explain to you what secondary primary stress is, but there is a stress on those syllables. So you would be right in thinking that they cannot possibly have the schwa because they have a stress on them. That's true. It's not always the case. Sometimes you have exceptions to some of these schwa patterns I'm going to show you in this video and in following videos, where the syllable might still be unstressed, but nonetheless maybe the mouth is quite fully formed. It's making a fully formed o or e or whatever sound, but you know, very often, yes, the stress does come into it. So you might want some more examples like connect completely. You might want some more exception examples like contradict, and I can give those to you. They're over on my website. You also might want some help in terms of forming this schwa vowel sound. Maybe it doesn't exist in your first language, or maybe just the spelling is influencing you. I find that even if people sometimes think they're doing it right, you kind of show them what they're doing and they realize, oh yeah, they're kind of unconsciously pronouncing those parts of words with an o sound just because the spelling is so influential. So that's a big part of my coaching, my one-to-one coaching. Right now, when I'm publishing this video, you know, my coaching is still thriving. I'm doing lots of one-to-one coaching. So if you do need some help, you should be able to reach out to me and I can help you one-on-one if that's something you'd be finding valuable. But If you just want some examples to work with, you can get some audio examples too. So you can go away and practice this by yourself. Then you can just head over to accent.coach for everything you need. So I hope that was useful. If you can find any hilarious ways to name this list, which I call Connect Completely, feel free to leave a comment below. Comment. There's one of the examples of an exception, right? Comment. I'm stressing it. I'm not using a schwa sound. So if you have any other examples, head over to my website. You can find them there, or just type some in the comments if you want to contribute. Contribute. There's another one, and we'll go from there. But we're going to carry on doing more of these lists. I'm going to do some more videos with more of these 12 patterns I've noticed containing a schwa. So if you'd like more of that, then just hit subscribe and the bell notification, all that normal stuff, so that you don't miss it. And I'll see you in the next one.